It's interesting how people see you and how you see yourself. I don't always see all the things people say about me, but if I try and connect them, what was it about this career? 702, Channel 702 in those days, the Rainbow of Sound, had started, and my best friend, who I shared a flat with, was a DJ on the station, and he told me they were looking for sales reps, and I went for an interview. They were way ahead of their time, so you talk about a rebellious place. They had a line-up DJ with a person of every colour, and it didn't fly in South Africa. It was just too advanced for what South Africa was going through. But they also had an independent news organisation called 702 Eyewitness News. And it was an environment that was tense, but very creative, and it was so progressive. So it was a wonderful environment. I just loved it. My parents were horrified that I was now in a radio station. My goodness. And there was a lot of fun, a lot of drugs, a lot of rock and roll. There was a lot of police arresting people. It was really a time, I think, that opened one's eyes. But I fell in love with the whole pace of all of it. Even though I was on the commercial side, we were well involved with everything that was going on. And I knew I'd found my niche. And it was the pace, mainly, of a media environment, particularly radio, that I found inspiring. And the fact that we were the rebels. So I have a bit of a rebellious streak because I like that. I like the fact that we weren't the norm, that we weren't the SABC, and that we were seen as a bit of trouble for a lot of people. Look, I was in the sales environment, and what was happening in those days is a lot of advertisers were starting to support this little rebellious station. So we were on a roll, and although I didn't have a career path that I looked at, I was in it for the money in those days, and we were making potloads, which also gave me a sense of freedom. So what started there was a lot of money coming in for those days, and it filled my dream of travel. So I was the first member of my family to ever go overseas. And I still remember at the age of 24, almost doing a world trip for 6 weeks. So that's what attracted me first. I don't really recall how I got into the sales management job, but there were quite a few managers that came through the place. And I had been in direct sales, and then I got into agency sales, and I did really well, and I loved it. And they offered me the job when the sales manager left or was fired. I'm not quite sure. I wasn't really watching what was going on. And I nearly didn't take it at the time because I was getting married. So I remember being put into this office, and then I had to go on honeymoon, which was great. And then I came back, and I think then I was about 27. So I wasn't that young anymore. I'd worked out a couple of things. And it was from there that I started to see this as a career in radio for the first time. I didn't see management as a big responsibility. I didn't see it as a leadership position. I was just involved with the people in the sales teams, and we all liked each other. So we became a bit of a unit, having fun. And I remember going to the financial manager at the time, saying the team was doing so well, could we go on an overseas trip? And we started sales incentives, which was something new for South Africa in those days. And we made our target, which was something like 12 million. And we all went to Rio. And again, what I found from these trips was just the people side interested me. So I loved the interaction with the people, what they were doing, their stories. And I developed a thing for people, I think, very early on. Not that I could label it then. From a responsibility point of view, I started to realize it was serious when it came to budget time. But I had a great FD who would help me with my budgets. I mean, I couldn't even do my budgets. And he would do them upside down. So I would have the figures facing me, and he was adding them up from his side. So I was helped a lot, actually, if I think back, of them giving me a target, explaining why they needed it, first lessons in business and why they needed that much money to make a profit, etc., etc. And it really took off from there. I was then sent on a course, interestingly, overseas it was called a mini MBA for radio. And when I got to that course in the States, there was another trigger for me. It was a profound memory because it was all about styles of people, profiles of people, personalities of people, because radio stations don't have any assets other than people. And I started to realize that this was something I could relate to. I enjoyed it. It was interesting. It was new. And I think it's been my passion, really, ever since then. So I still use the techniques and the systems that are available about people and profiles and styles and personalities and how you can get the best out of them, and the difference between men and women in the workplace and how they see things so differently, but if you can connect the two, how powerful it is. So it was always the more the better, or the bigger the pot, the better, rather than an individual. I never did it for myself. I was always doing it for the benefit of the team or the benefit of the people. You know, the people side, I started to realize that even in a sales team, which was the environment I was running, that I needed different types of people. So I needed people who would do admin. And in those days, salespeople did everything. And I didn't like that because they weren't good at it. So there was always problems with contracts and detail and adding up the numbers and filing stuff away. So I started to realize that we needed a team, that you couldn't just be a rep. Today it's called an account executive. But you couldn't just be a rep, go and sell, and then be expected to be able to do the admin side. So I started to build teams of people, employing admin people who loved admin. And that's what they wanted to do, and that's what fired them up. And then teaming them up with what I used to call the Teflon babes. I mean, people who just ran, got knocked back but ran again, and they didn't really care much about people. They were just chasing. And then trying to get these two teams now to work together. So the A's were always complaining about the admin people. They're so boring and, they're asking me questions and I don't have time. I spent a lot of time training them to understand that if they use the admin person well, and for the admin person not to be offended by this Teflon babe, that the team together could be stronger. So I also started in those days having very different profiles of people. So agency sales reps were more manipulating rather than direct, whereas direct reps were more hardcore going in. The admin people were softer but focusing on that. And I built this team and we just took off. And we also, when we went on the incentive trips, everybody went. So it wasn't just the high flyer in sales. So I'm a great believer in pulling everybody together, and everybody plays a role, no matter how big or small. Everybody should be rewarded or recognized, and they're part of a team. And I still have that philosophy today. So the sales team was running well, and I started to realize that if I could get access to programming, which in those days are the stars on air, and use them in the sales pitch, we would do even better. So even though I was in sales, I started to make my way across the corridor into programming, very different side of the business. But I started to have conversations with management about news, for instance, and could we sponsor news bulletins and, how would they want them done? So all of a sudden I was more involved in programming. And I must say, I was fearful of it because these were the big stars. They were mavericks. I mean, we had the John Burkeses in those days. We had some controversial characters. We had leaders in the business who were very creative but ruthless. And I started to see behavior that I didn't like, particularly when they were talking to, programming people. So I started to become very aware of different styles of managers in the building, some of which I liked, and some of which I wouldn't say they were mentors, but it was like if I ever got into that side of the business, I would never behave the way some of them were behaving. I found it upsetting because it wasn't the culture in the sales team, but it certainly opened my eyes to other leadership styles and other management styles that it didn't sit well with me. So I started to learn a few things that I wouldn't do if I ever got there. But even then, it wasn't like I was trying to get there. It was just something I noticed, and I became very aware of it. Even to the extent that I would bring it up at management meetings, and I was the only female, and I could never prove what I was trying to say because it didn't have a number, it didn't have an outcome. And I was dismissed often about it. Sort of like mumbo jumbo, there she goes again. But I persisted quite a bit, and the course that I had done overseas on profiles and personalities really triggered me, and I knew I was on the right track. If I look back now, I got away with it, but I was extremely rebellious. And I also started to realize then I had a bit of power because it was where the money was coming in. So we used to argue, who was more important, programming, because they made content we could sell, and then sales would go, but if we didn't sell it, you wouldn't get a salary too. And we started this wrangle about who was more important in the mix. But it was a rebellious time, and I was very vocal and very outspoken because I sort of knew they needed us. And we weren't just, those girls in sales. We were quite a female department in those days. In the sales environment, a lot happened at Primedia Broadcasting at that time. So we went from one station, 702, we had bought Highveld. I'd been seconded to Highveld to start up their sales team, so I ran the process again. Everything I'd done in 702, I had to recreate. We got a Greenfields license. We then acquired another station, and all of a sudden we were a big group. And we had the talk stations, and we had music stations. And what had happened at the time was the talk stations were going down in revenue. And the music stations were starting to cook, and the station manager of the music station resigned and left. And I was approached by the then CEO to say, would you become the station manager of 94.7 Highveld Stereo, as it was known in those days? And I was mortified. I was petrified because I didn't know anything about programming. Well, I thought I didn't. And I was scared of Jeremy Mansfield, funny enough. And at the time as well, I had found two other mentors in a way. And the one was a program manager who had come from, or a programming consultant who had come from Australia to help on the music stations, and I'd met him. And the other was a management consultant who had been brought in to try and fix the ills that were happening in 702 at the time. And they had lost their way, and they were so focused on the music station coming into the building that they were competing against that instead of looking at what they were doing. And I must say, when they first approached me, I was horrified. Then I started to realize that maybe I could do something here. And 702 particularly, from where I had spent many happy years, had turned into a place that was a bit miserable, and people were upset and miserable, which upset me because I knew them so well. Highveld was flying at the time on the revenue side and on air. So I thought, well, let me go in and learn more about radio as a whole. I did have a bit of a knack for programming because I had started to sell campaigns that included programming, and I had worked very closely with programming. So I took the job, provided there were two provisos, that the programming consultant would continue and not leave because the station manager had left, which he committed to do. And the management consultant that I'd met trying to help 702, I brought him into the Highveld side, the music side of the business. So I started in that role with these two men who I still work with today, became very close mentors on two very different disciplines of radio stations. I knew the sales and marketing side. I had somebody teaching me what to do on programming, and I had a management consultant showing me where the world was going, how teams were evolving, how businesses were developing. And so although I became the MD of the music radio stations, it was a team of three of us, again, that started to develop, taking these music stations forward. And I quickly got used to what I had to do. And again, I built my relationships with the programming people. And I didn't do what I had seen before with them. And I involved them in the whole station. So we all started to work together, even finance people, even IT technical people. We would have meetings where everybody was involved on why we were doing something. So I think thinking back, I shared a lot with them about the business as a whole, and we flew. We were having a whale of a time. So the music stations were doing really well, and the talk stations were plummeting. And I was approached again to say, can you fix 702? To which I answered yes, but I had no idea how I was going to do it. So I think when leaders go, I had a plan. I think they're talking rubbish, because my drive to perhaps taking the job as CEO was feeling so bad for the people in 702. And I remember it was a pivotal moment, actually, where a mail was sent to me. And in those days, email was a new thing, and I'm not the most computer literate person. But a mail was sent to me by the person running one of the stations who was not doing too well to say, look at this, what do you think? And I responded to her mail instead of to the person who forwarded me the mail. And I banged off a very direct line saying, it's not the way I see it, and it's a load of rubbish. And of course, as I hit send, that mail closed down and up popped the person who sent me the mail. And I realized immediately what I had done. And it's actually quite a funny story, because I flew across my desk because somehow I thought, if I pull all the cords out the wall, it won't send it. And I had a glass desk, and it had obviously a very sharp corner. And I hit my hip as I hit the desk. So I had blood pouring out my hip, and I was lying across this glass desk, ripping cords out of the wall, which cost a lot of money to fix. I'll never forget that. But the mail still sent, clearly. And the person who received it sent back one line, oops. And I remember looking at that thinking, I don't have a problem with it. I phoned and I said, you know what? Everything I said, I would have said to your face. And what I didn't like about it was the lack of truth, being told to 702 what was actually happening. So I think I realized also then, if you want to fix something, you got to be real. And you just got to treat people with respect if they deserve it. I mean, there are some people who don't deserve it. But just find out the story, be kind, tell people what's going on. And it's a leadership principle I still live by, that you got to model the way. So you got to lead by including everybody. I think secrets are such a bad thing. And I was then approached to take over the group, the CEO role, and primarily to fix 702. And I think that's where my leadership journey started for real, because now I had 4 radio stations, and I had to get this thing rolling. So I took the job after lots of haggling for CEO of Primedia Broadcasting, and now I had 4 individual stations, 2 in Cape Town, 2 in Joburg, all doing their own thing with their own teams, and it was a nightmare. And I started the process of integrating into one company, driven by 2 things. I had a lot of skilled people in all of them and unskilled people. The costs were soaring and the talks weren't making great money in those days. So I was driven by obviously cutting costs, like most leaders have to do, but for the right reasons. So I started integrating a lot of teams where we could save costs, but it was the right thing to do at the time. So when we were going out to the marketplace, from a business point of view, because you've got the radio station, which is entertainment to the public, but there's a business side, that we would go out with one offering and sell talk and music, Joburg and Cape Town, national or regional. So the first thing I did was integrate a sales team, which you must understand had been trained to go against each other. So when the talk reps were going out, they were going, oh, radio stations are just background music. Nobody hears your ad. The music stations were going out and say, talk's too intrusive, so nobody listens during the day, whereas they were all fighting against each other. And of course, by then, labor laws were increasing. There was a lot of rules in business that weren't there in the early days. So I remember the first task being integrating a sales team. So we had to give them notice on their current contracts and get them to reapply under Primedia Broadcasting because nobody was employed under that legal entity. And they had to prove to me that they could sell 4 brands. So I suppose the culling started where they would come in, could they sell both? Obviously they didn't have each other's product knowledge, but we were looking for a style in an individual that would buy into this. And they did. They reapplied for their jobs. We started to train them. At the same time, though, I had to integrate 2 radio stations who, one was on the 2nd floor, one was on the 4th floor, one didn't talk to the other one. So I remember saying at my first staff meeting that leaders do 3 things, or they've got 3 choices when they come in. The one is to keep everything the same, which wasn't an option. The other was to change everything, which was an option, but I knew it would freak them out. And the third option was to paint the walls a different color to know they had a new leader, and I went for the third option, the safest and third option. But I needed time to build my strategy, and I had this crazy notion about what's lovely is green grass, yellow hue, the sun shining, blue sky. So the first thing I did while I was reintegrating all these people and changing teams was I repainted the building, and I painted it yellow, which was nobody's corporate color. And I could see people freaking out, but I also gave them the choice that as I was going through the building, painting all these walls, I laid out permanent markers to say, write whatever your issue is on the wall, and I'll read it. It was like a new comment box. And people did. I used to float around the building at night and read what the issues were, what they were saying. And I used that when I was building what I had to build, or I knew what I would have to face as a challenge. So, not everything they say you're going to agree with. So I had that going. I had focus groups going on the brands, checking lineups, who was in the right positions, what did the public want. I had marketing teams looking at brand prints and what the stations would stand for, because I understood clearly they had to have a position in the mix. And then I had management consultants on the ground helping me with strategy and what was needed to be done. When I think back, I was so busy in those days. I was just running. But I was on a mission, and I was determined to fix it. So clearly, I'm quite competitive. People tell me that, but I didn't see it like that at the time. I wanted to fix it so that everybody would be happy, and I think that was my next lesson. You couldn't make everybody happy, and it became really tough because as you made one happy by giving them a role, you were getting rid of somebody else. And I remember a rumor going around the building that there was blood in my office, and it was flowing out my door and down the stairwell and out the building. And I was mortified. Quite emotional. You have to make the hard calls. And they were right. That for me hit home, but it was the right thing to do. So I think I learned then you had to do the hard things if you kept focusing on the outcome. So a lot of people think leadership is just about, you're at the top and you can shout instructions. I suppose you could. But no matter how you lead, there's hard moments in the business. So that really hit home. But at the same time, I just kept going because I knew what I had to do. And then I also tried to show a more caring side, which I think I am. I think I've got an enormous heart, although I don't always show it because you can't. My husband says the softest thing about me is my teeth. Anyway, at the same time, when all this was going down, I was also getting them new furniture. The environment was just toxic and it was ugly. And I think here's a throwback to my design days. I started, as I said, painting walls. I brought in colour. I went to presenters and asked what colour chairs they wanted. The 702 presenters were horrified that I was even having these conversations with them. And I remember Jenny Chris Williams saying to me, I want a pink chair. People were horrified, but I bought her a pink chair. And the whole place turned into a lot of colour. So there was colour everywhere. We were starting to get things going. We were starting to see benefits of the move. And remember, this is a period of 12 to 18 months. It doesn't happen overnight. You're moving at a pace because you've got to fix it. And at the same time, I've got a board of shareholders saying to me, but you said you would fix it. You said you would fix it. And I'm 6 months in and I'm going, give me more time. I need more time. But you said you would fix it. And I remember telling them it would take me 3 years and realizing they weren't going to wait that long. In fact, there was a moment where there was a discussion about selling 702. And I was fighting. I was fighting at board level. I was fighting on the ground. I was just trying to get everything going. But we turned 18 months into the process. When I say turned, the lineups had settled down. The staff were happier. We had cleared the building of people who shouldn't be there. We cleared the toxicity of what was happening in the space. And we were celebrating successes. So I'm also a great believer in modelling the way and being firm. But when there's something to celebrate, we would celebrate. So there was always a party or there was always something going down in the building. So we spent a lot of time playing, but working really hard as well. Something I try and keep up today. Although the business is so big today, we often stop and go, boy, when last did we have fun? Although we have fun every day, I think. You know, after all I had to do in the tearful moments, which I won't go there again, there was a competition out there called Boss of the Year. I didn't even know about it. And people on the management team and some of the staff, including those that I'd had to do a lot of hard work with, decided to enter me. And I shied away from the limelight. So I just wanted to be the person in the background, getting everything right. And I had this belief that I had all these shining stars and they would be the forefront of the business. And I think I hid for many years. But that was the start of bringing me out to the public. They entered me. And by the time I knew and caught up with them on what they were doing, I was already in the finals. And of course, now they had to disclose because I had to go for this interview. I was so mad with them for two reasons. One, it was pushing me publicly, which was not my style. And the other was, again, my competitive nature. What happened if I didn't win? I would be mortified if I didn't win. Anyway, I won it, thank God. I was so relieved. Not even happy, I was just relieved. But I think that said it all. And that was another turning point for me, that I could do this, that I could lead very challenging people who are leaders in their own right, that I could run a business, that I could integrate teams. And I was making money for the board. I mean, we were really, in those days, flying. I mean, we were growing at phenomenal double-digit growth, which was unreal in those times. And the other thing I learned there was to never stop trying. So I have a saying now, it still permeates in the building, where I'm always saying to them, just because you can't see where it's going is not a reason not to start. So I'm quite a risk taker, I think. I'll try something if I feel it. Another saying around the building. I'm often not shouting at them, but I'm often clicking my fingers going, can you see it? Can you see it? Can you feel it? Can you feel it? And they're all staring at me. I'm going, well, I can, let's go. And I've got this thing, if it doesn't work, we'll just stop and try something else. So we try a lot of things, even when we can't see where it's going. LeadSA is one of those stories. Well, LeadSA was an interesting story. It's also quite personal. It started personally when everything was going well in the business. We were learning, trying new things, doing well, but something was missing. And at the same time, things were going really badly in the country. And in a media organisation, the things you get on your screen in the morning is enough to make you want to stay in your bed and not get up. So I was dealing with seeing the ills of our country every morning, the most horrific stories, pleading for help. We would hear some of the stories on air, and we were trying to encourage particularly the talk stations to pick up these stories and do the right thing. I had worked so hard to make this work and make it to the top, and yet I felt like maybe I should be emigrating. So 2 things started with me. The one was standing at home looking at my 2 little girls and the dilemma. Do we emigrate after we've got to this point? I remember looking at my dogs thinking, what do I do with the dogs? And standing at home going, I can't believe we're going to have to emigrate. I can't believe this is happening. And it was my daughter, who was about 13 at the time. She said to me, Mommy, just do something about it. And I thought, just do something about it. So I started a conversation 2 years before 2010 with the management team about what are we doing? What do we do every day? And you get the normal business answers. We're in business to give prospects to advertise or whatever. I said, no, but why are we doing this? Why do we come to work every day? And at the same time, if you follow, I'm a great reader on business strategy and what's happening in the world, this purpose, it was called firms of endearment, where people were doing studies on companies who showed humanistic principles were outperforming on the index by 10 to 5 times better on their profits. So we started with this, what was our purpose? We went into strat calling on our purpose, and it was a really difficult time. We fought for a year. And the other thing we realized, it sounded a bit like Sunshine Radio. So we had a very heavy newsroom, as you know, EWN, going, we can't do this. We can't be Sunshine News. And then you approach somebody like a John Robbie on a talk station who was just like, you've got to be joking. And it didn't fly. It didn't fly at Strat. And management was saying to me, what are you doing? We've got a democratically elected government and you want to sound like government, because we were tinkering around there. I was going, John Robbie can be Minister of Sport and this one can be Minister of that, and then we can say this and we can say that. Anyway, we had a terrible fight at management, and I remember saying to them, if we don't have a purpose, I'm not doing this anymore. I can't do this anymore. And we refined it and got down to active citizenship. The answer was, change in the world comes from active citizens, not revolutions. Well, the revolutions work, but that's not what we were calling for. And just getting people to stand up, which is a LeadSA philosophy, do the right thing and make a difference. And we all settled on that. And then the World Cup was coming. So now we were in the dilemma of all this noise is going on about the World Cup, and the country lifted. So the spirit was up and people were happy. Wrong time to launch. So we were sitting with this baby that we had a brand for, that we had now developed, that we had spent months convincing the presenters on air why it was the right thing to do. And that was the most difficult selling job I've ever done. I mean, they couldn't connect it and they couldn't see where it was going. In hindsight, nor did we. We thought we had something. So we waited for the World Cup to pass, which was a good call in hindsight, because the country was on such a high. So what did they do after that? So we came in on the 4th of August, 2010, after the World Cup, to pick up from that spirit, which was everything we were calling for, just stand up and get together and get on with it. And LeadSA was born, and I was amazed at the uptake, because I expected a level of criticism like we've never seen, and it didn't come. Yes, you get the odd whiner, life is full of them, but generally the uptake was just amazing. So we are very busy now with LeadSA. I do have moments with LeadSA where, I don't know if I should be saying this, but I often go, if I ever have another stupid idea, just shoot me, because it's a lot of work. And I think why it's successful is it's just activating citizens. We've made some, not mistakes, but gone down directions where we can't make a difference. And the other reason it keeps going is LeadSA doesn't have a team. We all work on it. So it's everybody's responsibility to click in what they're doing on LeadSA. We don't have a budget. So it's not a campaign that's going to run out of money. And we don't make any money off it. So it's not something we will ever sell. And trust me, we could. We could be making a tidy profit off this thing, but then it would die because it would lose, again, its realness of resonating with people who just want to do good but don't know how to go about it. So we're 5 years in, we've made an enormous impact. I mean, if you change one life, isn't that enough? But we've changed many. And, we started the LeadSA Heroes, which we do monthly and culminate into one winner. And then we started the youth ones because we had these little kids of 10, raising money or collecting food, just mind-blowing stories of people out there doing the most amazing things. And we've just done our 5th year. And it's been overwhelming. I'm not even going to talk about the stories because they're so deep. It's incredible what people will do. Media Woman of the Decade was another award, quite surprising because I actually never ever won Media Woman of the Year. So every time it ran, I think I came 3rd one year, I came 2nd another year. And then they decided to do Media Woman of the Decade. Sure, and that was also a surprise. I won that. And it was another moment where you start thinking, why did I win it? And I remember at the function, they started to go through some of the things that they saw in my career, which is why they gave me the award. And clearly there's business, the increase in business. But it's interesting how people see you and how you see yourself. I don't always see all the things people say about me, but if I try and connect them, what was it about this career? And I think being a rebel certainly helps. So I do mentor women, a lot of women in my business, and I tell them a couple of things. One is women know everything. So they tend to not listen and they tend to come forward with what all the solutions are. And I've learned over many years to really listen. So I have a saying, I have 2 things that I teach them. The one is to actually physically sit on their hands because women generally, the hands start going and then the mouth goes and it just irritates everybody. So we have this thing of sitting on our hands because you can feel your shoulder go, which is a trigger to go just listen a little bit longer. The other one I make them do is have a sip of water and I won't let them swallow. So it's listening is important. But at the same time, if you're feeling something, and men and women feel it, and people say it's intuition, and then they'll say, oh, you're blessed with such intuition. Intuition comes from really knowing your business. It's not a gift. It's not a gift. It's something you learn to feel when you fully understand your business, when you fully understand the people in it, when you fully understand what's going on, which you get from listening. So all of a sudden you have a great instinct. So I think having a good instinct is important. So feel it. If you feel it, if it triggers your heart before your head, it's the right call. If you're trying to make it work in your head but you can't feel it, just let it go. It'll either come back or it won't. And I've got a bit of a thing about manners. Just manners are, for me, important. Just respectful manners, and kindness. To show kindness, it doesn't make you weak. Years ago, if you were kind or if you cried or if you were soft, you were useless, particularly for women. You were then marked as emotional and therefore couldn't be a good leader. So I teach, looking back again, the wording in that award was kindness and caring and involved in the community. So they had all the right business terms. But they're not. They are real things that people feel. And that's what I try and teach, and I think that has been my success at really listening. And then I think also not to be naive, that to really be successful in a leader, you have to make the hard calls. And you can do them in a nice way. They're hard and they're miserable, but you don't have to be mean about them. Something I think I referred to earlier of what I would never do. So anybody who's got to be moved on, or not even fired is the word, is there's a process that you can go through with them that I hope they thank me for one day rather than hate me for one day. And I think I've got more people being positive about what's happened to them than negative. And in fact, some come back and go, it's the best thing you ever did, was firing me. So I think that's the only thing I can touch on. I don't have any degrees, but I've done a lot of courses and I've done a lot of reading. I think gives you a good perspective of things. And, just caring for the people in your organization is something, doesn't cost a lot of money, does take a lot of time, but well worth it because they'll follow you. And that's what you need. You need people to follow you and be inspired by your vision, which you're sharing with them. And then I think my other factor is enabling them to act. So it's all very well telling them to do something, but then you need to ask if they have the right equipment, if they, have the right backup, if you've got to enable people to act. Whereas a lot of companies just want more, but they don't ask people what they need. I don't ask them what they want. I ask them what they need. So that's some of the things I've done, which, and I get bored really easily. I think that's the other thing. If I get bored, everybody starts going, oh no, yeah, she goes again. So if I'm bored, it's like God help them all because we're on to something new. But I think that's the innovation side. That's like, come on, we've been doing it this way. What else can we do? So we also run meetings where people can express themselves. So we run a thing called Wedgie Wednesday, which a wedge is something that you can wedge into the business that'll take us forward. Doesn't cost a lot of money. And if it doesn't work, we can pull out really quickly. It's amazing. Today, your solutions come from your staff. I don't think the leader can do it on their own anymore. So that's my last shot here, that you need very good teams around you. And I've been a great believer in building my team. And they add great value to me. And I look for, again, comes the styles. I look for different styles. So, I've got one guy who's very strategic and he thinks 5-6 years down the line. And I'm always going, get to the point. But he brings that in. Then I've got somebody who's very good at cleaning up my rambling and making it functional. And then you've got creative people. And then you've just got those who are willing to do whatever it takes to get the job done. So you need all these personality types, all these people, but they all want to go where you're going. So it's about, I'll come back to where I started, teams, building teams of people. You can't do it on your own. I don't think any leader does it on their own.